I'm Grace Whitaker, and I found out how invisible I'd become the same night my sister brought her fiancé home to be measured against a family script. The good tablecloth was out. The good chicken was made. My sister Claire had spent all afternoon on a roast she'd perfected years ago, back when winning things came naturally to her. I came from my workshop straight across town, and no matter how hard I scrubbed, the smell of linseed oil stayed in my knuckles like something I couldn't quite confess to. My mother seated me at the far end of the table, past the good silver, in what she liked to call the conversation zone, which meant I wasn't in it. That part was normal. What wasn't normal was the way everyone kept glancing at me. Not with curiosity, with dread. Like I was a vase set too close to the edge of a shelf. James, Claire's fiancé, was the only one who looked at me like a person. Tall, patient, the kind of man who turns his whole body toward whoever's speaking. He asked my father about his tomatoes and actually listened to the answer. My mother watched him like an auditor. Claire watched him like a lottery ticket. And in between, everyone kept watching me, like they were all bracing for something breakable. Then James turned his chair fully toward me and asked the simplest, most dangerous question in the world. "So what do you do, Grace?" My mother set her fork down with a sound like a gavel. "Don't embarrass us," she said lightly, the way you'd say pass the wine. And that lightness was exactly what made it land like a slap. The table laughed. Not cruelly, that would have almost been kinder. It was rehearsed laughter, the laughter of people who'd heard this joke before and knew their part. My sister leaned toward me, smiling the smile she saves for cameras, and said, "Maybe just lie this time so you don't sound so pathetic." The laughter got warmer. The vase had been moved safely back from the edge. James didn't laugh. I noticed that even then. I'd done this dance since I was 22. Smile. Pass the beans. Drive home and talk to the furniture. The furniture is more polite. Any other night, that would have been the whole story. But that afternoon I'd come down off a scaffold under a 130-year-old church ceiling, and something in me was tired in a place that had never been tired before. So I opened my mouth. "I'm a conservator," I said, calm as a level laid across a workbench. "I restore things people gave up on." My mother inhaled through her nose, the sound of a correction being loaded, and steered the table toward honeymoon plans. Portugal, maybe Italy. The conversation rolled on without me, the way it always did, and I reached for the green beans, already retreating back into the job I knew best, being furniture. Except James hadn't moved. His glass was frozen halfway to his mouth, and something was assembling itself slowly on his face. "I'm sorry," he said. The table kept talking. "Whitaker," he said louder. The table went quiet. "Whitaker Conservation," I said. "On Millbury Street. That's my shop." He laughed, one short, astonished note, and turned his phone around to show me a photograph. A walnut highboy 1780s, the veneer glowing like something poured from light. I knew that piece the way you know your own signature. I'd spent 5 months of my life a foot away from it. "You did this," he said. "This is one of our foundation's pieces. My mother has been trying to reach you for 14 months. You could have heard the refrigerator hum from 2 rooms away." My mother's face went looking for a script and came back empty. Claire's fork stopped in midair. James kept going, having no idea he was quietly rearranging the whole house as he spoke. His family ran the Bennett Foster Foundation for Arts Preservation, a name even my mother recognized from the society pages she pretends not to read. They'd funded the restoration of Fairmont Hall, the old limestone estate out on County Road 9, and the selection committee had ranked exactly one conservator first for the ballroom ceiling, me, the only documented apprentice of Walter Bennett, who'd restored that same hall back in 1987. "We wrote to your shop twice," James said, bewildered. "You're a hard woman to reach." "I'm behind on my mail," I said, which was true. I did not say that I assumed anything embossed was junk. Also true. My mother recovered fast, I'll give her that. "Well," she said, patting the table like it was a nervous horse, "Grace dabbles. She's always been artistic. Mrs. Whitaker, James said, polite, unmoving, terribly sincere. The committee doesn't rank dabblers. Nobody laughed at that. My mother got me alone in the kitchen once dessert plates gave everyone an excuse to scatter. She has a special voice for damage control, low administrative, the voice of a woman who ran a hospital billing office for 26 years. You will not take that job, she said, scraping frosting off a plate in surgical strokes. I asked why not. Because that hall is where your sister is getting married. Ladders and tarps for months, you in coveralls while his family walks through in suits. She rinsed the plate and looked at me, and for one strange second I saw the thing underneath the performance. Not contempt. Fear. This wedding is bigger than your hobby, Grace. One wrong impression and people decide things about a family. That's all it takes. There it was. Her whole operating system laid bare on the counter. She had never once asked if I was good at what I did. Good wasn't the metric. Explainable was the metric. I drove home with the windows down. Above my workbench hangs a yellowed card in my mentor's block printing. Nobody claps for the glue. It holds anyway. At 11 that night my laptop pinged. A formal invitation from the Fairmont Preservation Trust. Subject line, ceiling. I read it 3 times and slept like a stone. My sister called the next morning, half apology, half interrogation, wanting to know why I'd made it weird at dinner. Our family's phrase for telling the truth in a load-bearing location. In the tangle of it, something slipped out. They'd briefed James before I ever walked in the door. Grace is between things. Don't ask her too much. It's a sore subject. That's why the whole table had spent the salad course watching me like weather. I was a managed risk at my own family's dinner table. It wasn't mean, Claire insisted. Mom just wanted the night to go well. Then quieter, she said the truest thing anyone in my family has ever said to me. You weren't supposed to matter tonight. I heard her hear it, the little intake of breath after. I didn't mean it like that, Grace. Nobody ever means it, I said. That's the whole problem. I should tell you how I got here, because my mother's version has me wandering off some sensible path into the woods. Here's mine. At 18, I did 1 semester of accounting chosen because my mother had a speech about health insurance and a picture in her head of a daughter behind a desk. That October, our church hired an old man to repair a water-damaged altar rail, and I stayed after choir just to watch him work. His name was Walter Bennett. 71 years old, hands like tree roots. He touched that ruin with the way paramedics touch people. Nothing's hopeless, he told me. Some things are just waiting for somebody patient. I dropped accounting by Thanksgiving. My mother didn't speak to me for a month, which she called dignity and I later learned to call weather. I apprenticed under Walter for 12 years in the same brick storefront on Milbury Street. Veneer, gilding, the chemistry of old varnish, and one rule above all. First, do nothing you can't undo. He died 2 winters ago, at his own workbench, the only place he'd have agreed to go. He left me the building, the tools, and a boiler with a death rattle. Here's the detail I didn't see clearly for years. The sign out front says Whitaker Conservation. No first name. No photo in the local paper ever. I declined 3 times. 12 years of work. And I had never once signed a piece where a person could point to it and say hers. I told myself that was humility. Keep that in your pocket. We'll need it later. The trust met me in the ballroom itself. Sheets over the chandeliers, lights slanting through the arched windows, and above it all, the ceiling. An 1897 mural, the 4 seasons wheeling around a painted sky, gray with a century of lamp smoke, a water stain bleeding down one corner like an old grief. My neck ached within the first minute and I didn't care. The offer. Ceiling and grand staircase, 9 months, $48,000 including materials. The job of my life. Then the director slid over a second document, a media clause. A television series called Made to Last had partnered with the foundation's funders. Cameras, interviews, the finished hall in use. My mouth went dry in a way no amount of money could fix. I asked for a personal carve-out. No on-camera interviews, credit in text only. The director raised an eyebrow but allowed it. I signed with the fountain pen Walter had left me. My hand shook, nobody mentioned it. On my way out, a woman flagged me down in the parking lot. Helen, the retired town librarian, gardening gloves and no preamble. Grace Whitaker. I'm still cross with you, you know. We invited you to exhibit at the library last spring. The history of local craft. You turned us down flat. Didn't even write back yourself. I stood there with my new contract under my arm. Helen, I said slowly, I never received that invitation. Who told you I turned it down? She looked at me for a long moment. Why, your mother, dear. She answers for you. I didn't let myself believe it yet. I needed to verify. So I waited for the next Sunday dinner, where my mother delivered her counterattack disguised as an announcement, to the table, not to me. The $20,000 my grandparents had set aside years ago for my building would be held back for wedding costs instead. Weddings come first, she said. The boiler will keep. The boiler, for the record, was 14 years past its service life and sounded like a man clearing his throat before bad news. Then the second blow, delivered with a smile over the gravy. Hensley's Accounting is hiring, by the way. A real desk. Something I can say out loud at church. There it was again. Her one commandment. Be sayable. I didn't fight at that table. You never win at her table, it's hers, but I did the math on the drive home. $48,000 would carry the shop, but not a new boiler too. So I picked up night work, French polishing dining sets at a furniture warehouse in Toledo, 10 to 1 in the morning, 3 nights a week. Days under a painted sky. Nights buffing shellac under fluorescent light. You want to know what a woman is worth in my family? Check what she's allowed to freeze for. Helen forwarded me an old email chain that week, and I sat at my bench and read my own quiet erasure in my mother's polite handwriting. My daughter is no longer working in this field. Please remove her from your list and do not contact her again. The date lined up with the same month I'd finished a carousel horse for the county museum. Uncredited, admired in the local paper, and never once mentioned at our dinner table. I don't think my mother sat somewhere cackling in the dark. I think she genuinely believed she was steering a wayward daughter around potholes. Every door she quietly closed was, in her arithmetic, one less chance for me to stand in public wearing coveralls and shame her. That's what made it worse. Malice you can argue with. Fear just runs. The scaffold went up in Fairmont Hall on a Tuesday in November. The first day, I did what Walter taught me to do with any patient. I lay flat on my back on the deck, an arm's length from the mural, and just looked. Up close, the 4 seasons came apart into brushstrokes. A swallow's wing in 3 strokes. A harvest wagon with its wheel blurred into motion. I held my palm a few inches off the plaster, not touching. You introduce yourself first. While I lay there, the venue manager called up through the scaffold, friendly as a doorbell. Big year coming. We're booked solid after your reveal. First events already locked in. August wedding, Whitaker Bennett Foster party. Any relation? The scaffold didn't move. I didn't move. Somewhere above my face, painted January went on snowing over a painted village. Distant, I called down. Which is the truest thing I've ever said through scaffolding. My sister wanted the finest hall in the county, and the finest hall in the county was going to be beautiful because of me. And no one in my family had connected those two facts, because connecting them would require saying my name and the word conservator in the same sentence. My mother came to the workshop that December. Her first time through the door in 34 years. She stood in the middle of my shop, coat on, purse in both hands, like a woman refusing to check her bags into my life. She looked at none of it. Not the racked lumber, not the carousel horse waiting for its museum crate. Withdraw from the Fairmont contract, she said. I'll give you $25,000. More than the boiler. More than your grandparents' money. Call it a business decision. I asked her to explain the business. She did, and I'll say this for my mother. When she finally shows you her ledger, she doesn't flinch. This wedding was the merger of her lifetime. A daughter on scaffolding at the venue was a liability. A daughter in coveralls during the in-laws walkthrough was a liability. One wrong impression, Grace. People decide things about a family. I listened to all of it. Then I told her the truth in the only language I fully own. This one isn't reversible, Mom. First rule of my trade. Never do what you can't undo. I signed. It's load-bearing now. She looked at me a long moment, something shifting behind her face. Not anger. Inventory. A recount coming out wrong. At the door, hand on the frame my mentor had planed by hand decades ago, she said only. Then stay off the ladders in August. And she was gone. The bell over the door rang bright and stupid into the quiet. $25,000, to not exist at my own sister's wedding. My father came by 2 weeks later with a box of cookies and something he needed to put down. He told me about my mother at 15, her father the school janitor, the other mothers dragging their shoes across the floor when she walked by, the newspaper she kept in her shoes one whole winter so no one would hear them squeak. She showed me once when we were courting, he said. Then never again. Made me swear. He didn't eat his cookie. The day you quit accounting for furniture. She cried in the garage where you couldn't see. Not because she thinks the work is beneath anybody. Because she spent 40 years getting the squeak out of this family's floors, and you walked back onto the wax on purpose. We sat with that a long time. It doesn't make it right, he said finally, the bravest sentence of his marriage. But you should have the whole ledger. It's so much easier to fight a villain than a wound wearing your mother's coat. The wedding invitation arrived in March, heavy cream stock. Fairmont Hall press blind into the paper so I could feel my own job under my thumb. Behind it came my mother's call, laying out terms. I would attend as Claire's sister, who was between jobs. Simpler that way. Don't embarrass us twice. Twice. I stood in my shop, looking at the wall where 12 years of other people's treasures had gotten their names back. And I understood the pull of it completely. Every family has a currency. Mine pays in one coin, being no trouble. I had been rich in it my whole life. Instead, I picked up the RSVP card, and in the good ink in my steadiest hand I wrote, Grace Whitaker, Conservator, Fairmont Hall. Attending. No +1. No explanation. I walked it straight to the mailbox so I couldn't reconsider. When the lid clanged shut, it sounded exactly like a chisel seating home, the kind of cut you can't steam back out. My mother received the truth by mail. She did not call. Her silence had a size to it. Spring came, and the water stain in the east corner surrendered inch by inch, revealing a painted harvest girl nobody had seen clearly since before my grandmother was born. Some nights I fell asleep on the scaffold deck, flat under a sky, slowly remembering it was blue. The funders visited every few weeks, and that's how I met Rebecca Foster, James's mother, chair of the foundation, a woman who wore quiet the way other people wear jewelry. On her third visit, studying the mural beside me, she said conversationally, Odd. Your family told us you were between jobs. I kept my eyes on the painted sky. I'm never between jobs, I said. Just between thank yous. She laughed once like a door unsticking. From that day on, there were 2 women in the county who knew exactly what I was worth. In June, the producer from Made to Last came to schedule the finale segment. A kind man with a ponytail and an editor's honesty. We'll respect your carve-out, Ms. Whitaker, he told me. But understand, we film the ceiling either way. The story airs either way. Your name is in the trust documents and the credits. That part isn't yours to hide anymore. The only thing you control is whether the person in that story is a name on a black screen, or a woman standing under her own work. He let that sit before adding the sentence that followed me around for a month. In my experience, when the subject won't speak, someone else always will. Stories don't stay unnarrated. They just change narrators. I climbed back up the scaffold after he left, and for the first time, the silence up there didn't feel like sanctuary. It felt like a draft coming through a joint I'd never sealed. All my life I told myself invisibility was humility. It isn't a neutral act. It's a vacancy. And vacancies get filled. We struck the scaffold on the first Friday in August, and Fairmont Hall got its sky back. Late sun poured through the arched windows, and the trust's director stood in the middle of the parquet and forgot to finish her sentence. Then 2 men from the foundation did something I hadn't requested and couldn't stop. They mounted a small bronze plaque by the ballroom door, per foundation policy, the same policy that credits architects and long-dead painters. Ceiling and staircase restoration. G. Whitaker, Whitaker Conservation. 4 inches of metal. My name in public at the scale of 2 fingers. I stood in front of it longer than I'll admit. That's when I heard heels on the parquet behind me. My mother mid-walk-throw with the wedding planner. She saw me. She saw the plaque. Her face didn't move at all. Then she turned to the planner, gesturing at the doorway at my name and said, "A potted fern would soften this corner, don't you think? Something tall." The planner made a note. My mother walked on into the sunlit hall her daughter had raised from the dead, trailing a to-do list planning her fern. The night before the wedding, I let myself into the hall one last time under contractor's privilege, climbed the maintenance deck, and lay a foot beneath my finished sky. Tomorrow this room would be full of family, lilies, and a film crew, and somewhere in the middle of it, my family's version of me and my own version were finally going to occupy the same 100 feet of parquet. I set my terms as plainly as setting a clamp. I would go as a guest and a sister. I would not perform. I would not campaign. But if the truth walked up and asked me a direct question, I was done lying to its face. I climbed down, locked my kit, and my phone buzzed in the dark hall. A message from the producer. "Heads up. Someone from your family called the network this afternoon. Introduced herself as the family spokesperson. Wanted to preview our questions." I stood under the ceiling a long moment, phone glowing in my hand. My mother had called a national television network to manage my footage. And the only thing she'd accomplished was making sure I'd hear about it, with time to think. Wedding morning was blue and merciless, the kind of August day photographers pray for. My phone lit up before 9. "Just keep it vague tonight," Claire wrote. "Please. Just tonight." Vague. The family's word for me in the end. Not a lie exactly. A soft focus. A fern in front of a plaque. I typed and deleted an answer 4 times, then sent the only thing that was true and kind at once. "I'll be exactly your sister. Promise." I put on the sea glass green dress, the only thing I owned that had never been within 10 feet of a shellac pot, and looked at myself in the mirror over my workshop sink. Not between jobs. Not a bit lost. A woman with 9 months of a ceiling in her shoulders and her own name freshly cut into bronze, headed to a wedding where the script called for her to be scenery. The hall was drowning in white lilies when I arrived. The quartet was good, and when Claire came down the grand staircase, my staircase, every baluster of which I'd cradled like a patient, even I forgot, for one full second, that it was a restoration and not a miracle. She was radiant. James looked at her the way my mentor used to look at pieces everyone else had written off. I cried into an actual monogram napkin because she is my sister, and I am not made of shellac. My mother ran the event like a conductor, and I'll give her this forever. She was magnificent. Every transition greased, every relative shepherded, every variable managed. Almost every variable. Because through the ceremony and into the reception, quietly, on long lenses from the gallery, the film crew was recording the room being alive. And the room, my room, was performing over all our heads. Guests kept glancing up. You could watch it travel table to table, that little upward drift of chins. Somewhere behind the cake table, a bronze plaque stood in plain sight, because that afternoon someone from the foundation had asked the venue manager, in writing, that a certain fern stay moved. Rebecca Foster raised her champagne to me from 40 feet away, a toast the size of a secret. The producer noticed, tracked it back to me, and checked his watch against the light. The dinner break my mother had negotiated into the schedule was in 20 minutes. The segment, I understood with total clarity, was not. He crouched by my chair between the toasts and the cake, voice pitched low. Lights in 10 minutes. One segment, the restorer under the restored ceiling. The trust confirmed you're in the room. One sentence, Ms. Whitaker. You can decline and we shoot the ceiling without you. But I'd be lying if I said it'd be the same film. I opened my mouth to answer, and a hand closed on my elbow, warm, manicured, absolute. My mother, smiling her hostess smile at the producer. Excuse us. She's needed for family photos. She steered me through a service door into the back hallway, past the flowers, into the part of any venue where the truth actually lives. Fire extinguishers, folded linens, bare concrete. The smile fell off her like a price tag. Not tonight. Don't embarrass us. Third time in my life that sentence would matter. This time I heard everything packed inside it. The newspaper in her shoes. 40 years spent getting this family off the wax. My mother, who does not negotiate, was negotiating, which is how I knew she was afraid. You step into that light in your little dress and tell them you're trade at your sister's wedding, and you make the whole night about you, she said. Do that and don't come to Sunday dinner. I mean it, Grace. I have never meant anything more. There it was. The full price printed clearly. No hidden fees. Mom, I said quietly. The winter you were 15. The newspaper in your shoes. Her face went white, then a furious pink. Who told you that? I understand what you've been running from my whole life, I said. I finally do. But Mom, I'm not the squeak in the hallway anymore. I'm the ceiling. I'm the thing this whole county is sitting under tonight. Her grip on my elbow loosened, not to release me, to recalculate. And then my mother did the last thing left in her arsenal, the true last thing. She let me see the wound. Her eyes filled and her voice when it came wasn't the billing office anymore. It was 15 years old and wearing wet cardboard. Respectable is all I have, Grace. It's all I ever had. I know, I said, and I meant it as tenderly as anything I've ever said. I'm giving it back to you. All of it. I'm only taking my name. I lifted her hand off my elbow the way I lift a clamp once the glue has set. No yank, no drama, just a quarter turn because the joint is either strong now or it never will be. You'll regret this, she said to my back, quiet, almost to herself. For the first time in my life, it sounded less like a curse than a question. I pushed the door open into the light. They killed the uplights on the dance floor and brought up the wash on the ceiling, and an 1897 sky ignited over the reception. 180 conversations rolled to a stop. People who'd been eating under that ceiling for 2 hours saw it, truly saw it for the first time. That's the difference between a room and a revelation. Into the hush, the host asked gently, "And who are you?" "Grace Whitaker," I said. "I restored the ceiling. It took 9 months and 129 years." A ripple of laughter and awe, getting along for once. He asked what the work really was underneath the chemistry, and I gave him the only sermon I've ever had. My teacher used to say, we don't hide the cracks. We make them strong enough to hold. Everything up there has failed at least once. That's not the shameful part. That's the load-bearing part. I watched that land on faces. The trust director, a cousin of James's, my father standing at the edge of the parquet. Hands folded, crying without fuss, the way careful men cry. Then the question I'd braced for since the hallway. Your family's here tonight, I understand. Who gets the credit for all this talent? The temptation sat right there, gift-wrapped, national. One sentence about a mother who'd answered letters in my name for years. I looked into the lens and felt the whole weight of it pass through my hands and set it down. My teacher was Walter Bennett, I said. He restored this hall back in 1987. Everything else I owed to this room. Applause started near the cake table and moved through the hall like weather. My sister stood first, hands over her mouth, the ceiling burning gold above her. The camera panned the family table and found one chair empty, its napkin folded with terrible neatness. My mother had left before the lights came up. She missed the cake. She missed her own triumph, executed to the minute, and the last minute had belonged, after all, to the daughter in the little dress. My father stayed. He stood beside me while the crew coiled cables, holding 2 glasses of champagne like evidence, not saying much. Finally he touched the sleeve of my dress. "The janitor's granddaughter," he said. "Look at you. I'll keep that forever." Claire found me by the plaque, mascara gone soft, bouquet dangling from one hand. "You didn't lie this time," she said. "I never did." She looked up at the ceiling of her own wedding for a long moment, doing math that takes decades to finish. "It's the most beautiful room I've ever seen," she said. "It always was. It just needed somebody patient," I told her. She hugged me hard, then whispered that the fern was mine to move, that she'd signed the request herself. My sister. There's hope in that girl yet. That night, back over the shop, I sat with a cup of tea and watched my inbox do something it had never done before. 4 museums, 2 churches, an auction house, a university program, all before midnight. And 1 text from my mother, timestamped 9:41, which I'll translate for you into her native dialect. It said, "The plant would have looked better." I laughed alone in my kitchen until the kettle joined in. I didn't answer. Some joints you leave unclamped and let the wood decide on its own. The segment aired that spring, 11 minutes of a ceiling, and 40 seconds of a woman in sea glass green talking about cracks. Here's the aftermath measured because I don't deal in miracles. The shop is booked 3 years out. I hired 2 apprentices, one of whom walked away from a half-finished finance degree to learn hide glue. The boiler is new. I paid for it myself, which matters to me in a way accountants would understand after all. My family didn't collapse. Families like mine don't collapse. They rebrand. My mother goes to the same church, sits in the same pew, tells the same women that her daughter works with museums now. The fern is never mentioned. The wedding is described as having been featured on national television. The reason for the featuring left gracefully vague. The old machinery didn't die that night. It never does. It just updates its language. What actually changed is smaller and bigger. It doesn't run me anymore. Sunday dinners went on without me, and the strangest discovery of that whole year was that I wasn't hungry at that hour. My father comes by the shop every other Wednesday, drinks his coffee in the good chair, learns the names of glues the way other men learn ball players, and never once tells me what my mother says about the broadcast. Sometimes love is just showing up on alternate Wednesdays and mispronouncing shellac with total commitment. I'll take it. A year on, my sister came to the workshop a second time. No swatches, no pretext, carrying our grandmother's little jewelry box, its hinge torn clean out of the wood. She sat on my mentor's old stool for 2 hours, watched me cut the patch, asked real questions, used the word provenance correctly, and grinned at herself for it. We're learning a new language, my sister and I. Slowly, without a phrase book. Then one October Wednesday, my father arrived carrying something wrapped in a dish towel, holding it the way you hold someone else's newborn. My grandmother's good teacup, the one nobody was ever allowed to wash, broken into 3 pieces, hidden in a drawer for years the way we hide what shames us. Tucked in the towel was a note, 1 line in a slanted hand I'd know anywhere. "If you have time." No apology. No signature. My mother doesn't speak that language, and at 63 she isn't going to learn it now. But in her native tongue, in the grammar of a woman who spent her whole life hiding every crack she ever suffered, handing me a broken thing and trusting me to mend it was the longest sentence she had ever said to me. I repaired it kintsugi style. The seams dusted gold, the breaks made brighter than the glaze, strong enough to hold. I sent it back with no invoice. Some work you do for the record. I'm Grace Whitaker, 35 now. And these days when strangers ask what I do, there's a bronze plaque and a booked calendar that answer before I can. But I answer anyway, out loud, first person, every single time. If I've learned one thing worth the price I paid for it, it's this. You can spend your whole life waiting for your family to say your name right, or you can sign it yourself and let the work say the rest.